thank you for sharing some of the things that you're working on. I will also say, I really love having someone with a depth and breadth of public health knowledge and expertise that continues to be, at least for me, a top priority. And comprehensive healthcare curriculum and services is something that we've talked a lot about here. And, I think recently I've also been trying to figure out other ways to deeper dive into the engagement, or education around what that looks like. So appreciate all of the good work that you're doing there. You're also welcome to stay, but I know everyone has full lives and other things to get to. So thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you for your time. Have a good night.
So moving right along, the next item that we had is a resolution. This is the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution. I do just want to share a little bit before we, let's see, I have it here, but it might be good to get it up on the screen. But before we do that, just a couple of comments here that I'll make. This is, I believe, the second year that we're doing this Indigenous Peoples Day proclamation. Frida's looking at me or pointing 3, so perhaps it's the third year. Thank you. I know that this is the third year that we're doing the Heritage Month proclamations. I want to share a little bit about why I think the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution proclamation is particularly important. I think, right now we are seeing tremendous impacts in both Black and Indigenous communities across the board, not only public health impacts around COVID, but also violence against these communities. And I think particularly impacted with climate change and education inequities. And so for us, it's really important as a district and as district leadership to lift up not just these deficits, but all of the vibrancies and culture. And I think positives that these communities have and that our communities are continually using as strengths through what we're seeing. So we have this resolution here that I will go ahead and read. Appreciate all of the engagement that we got on this one so far. So this one is David Douglas School District Indigenous Peoples Day resolution. Whereas the David Douglas School Board of Education Board recognizes that the Indigenous peoples of the lands that would later become known as the Americas have occupied these lands since time immemorial, and whereas the board values the many contributions made to our community through Indigenous peoples' knowledge, labor, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and the deep cultural contribution that has substantially shaped our district. And whereas the board has established that each student is to be celebrated and appreciated for the distinct and vibrant contributions made by sharing cultures, language, ideas, beliefs, and values within a school community. And whereas the board recognizes that the David Douglas School District is built upon the homelands and villages and traditional use areas of the Multnomah and Clackamas Chinookan of this region, without whom the building of the district would not be possible. And whereas the district has an adopted equity policy that states our commitment to closing the achievement gap for Indigenous peoples and creating an educational environment where all students can benefit equally from the educational programs offered. And whereas the district is working towards eliminating the racial predictability and disproportionality on all aspects of education and has recently established a racial equity committee. And whereas the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations. And whereas the Oregon American Indian / Alaska Native State Plan mandates that the public schools of our district teach about the history, culture, contemporary lives, and governments of the Indigenous peoples of the Americas, with special emphasis on those from Oregon and across the Pacific Northwest. Now, therefore, be it further resolved that every second Monday of October will be Indigenous Peoples Day in the David Douglas School District. Be it further resolved that the district shall encourage staff to utilize the second Monday in October as an opportunity to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous peoples on this land, to celebrate the thriving cultures and values of the Indigenous peoples of our region, and to stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples everywhere. Be it further resolved that the district calendars and websites shall reference the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day. Oh, one more. Be it further resolved that the board strongly encourages our staff and community to observe, recognize, and celebrate the culture, heritage, and contributions of Native Americans to our country, our state, our cities, and our schools. Okay. Thank you all for that. So the next item that we have is consent agenda. This is an action item. So board colleagues, when you are ready, I will go ahead and do a roll call. We need a first and a second.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
So Stevens moves, Christopher seconds. I will call you all as I see on my screen, which starts with Frida. Christopher?
Aye.
And I'm next. So Valderrama, I vote aye. Barrow?
Aye.
Stevens?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
And Barber?
Aye.
Great. And I guess I will just note that Mudanovic is absent. So the consent agenda is approved. The next item that we have is an approval of purchase of technology devices. This is also an action item, and I will turn it over to Pat for this item. Go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. So about 2 weeks ago, ODE notified us that they were able to work with Dell because about every 2 weeks we happen to have a meeting, all the business managers, and we were expressing our frustrations and difficulties in getting hotspots and Chromebooks. And so we've been doing that now for about 6 weeks in getting updates from ODE on a 2-week basis. And about 2 weeks ago, ODE is able to work with Dell. Dell has some allotments of Chromebooks that are available. And so if districts are interested, here's kind of what's available. So we got that. I sent that to the tech department, and because it appeared that the touchscreen Chromebooks were available. These are devices that would be received no later than November 30th. And so in looking at what we have left in our CDL grant and our CARES Act funds, we are able to probably provide for about 2/3 of the cost of procuring these touchscreen Chromebooks. So if you remember back in July, we had to have an emergency meeting because we weren't able to get them and the delivery date kept getting pushed farther and farther. So it is a guaranteed delivery by November 30th. And that's how we would be paying for these. And I do want to bring to your attention that on Tuesday, we actually sat to talk with Dell about our interest in the order. And one of the services that we usually get from Dell, but wasn't mentioned when the state said, hey, here they are and here's the cost, is that Dell would be able to help prep those Chromebooks. So you did receive a revised approval right before the board meeting, going from $735,000 to $760,000. That allows us to get those Chromebooks that are already have their Google enrollment. I think I said that right, Derek. And are already prepped and ready to go for students. That will help us expedite getting them out when we get them.
Yes, you did that.
Okay, so that's what we're asking for approval tonight. And are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So that's adding it up 2,070 Chromebooks, and I'm just wondering, does that, like, what's the proportion of students that still don't have technology at this point? Are we looking at backup systems? Are we looking at Like, are there kids that are struggling right now to even connect?
That's a great question. So just to give a little bit of history, back in 17, 18, Ken and I had some conversations about, we've got 12,000 devices, Chrome devices. Why aren't we one-to-one? And so we began planning, and fast forward to 18, 19, and we started taking a look and having conversations with Google about the age of some of our computers. And we realized that a substantial amount, which would be about 3,500, would be end of life as of July 2020. So we started planning, okay, what do we need to do? So we bought in 18, 19, we bought 1,600 Chromebooks for 1,600 Chromebooks for high school, and that would allow us to go one-to-one. Then COVID happened, and it's like, oh my gosh, we got to do something about this. And so Casey and I met, that is my hardware software administrator that oversees kind of the nuts and bolts of the Chromebooks and Google and all of that. And so basically what we did is we said, we got to fast track this. So we talked with Pat about Chromebooks, and that's where it came, where you approved the 2,300 Chromebooks. And so, and then the question was, and I believe Chair Valderrama asked, what about touchscreens for at least the K1 kiddos? And at that time, we were being quoted late January, February, and maybe even March before we could get the touchscreen. So they were completely out of our realm of being able to get them. When Pat came to us, I think, Pat, you said 2 weeks ago, and said, hey, we've got this opportunity through Dell, and Dell is who we normally go through. We said, well, by chance, do they happen to have 2,000-ish, 2,100 touchscreens that we could give to our K1, K2 kiddos? And the answer to that was, yes, we do. And so this has been in our plan to do. The end goal was to have this for the 21-22 school year, but because of deals and because of some financing and really because of the great work that Pat does about combining budgets and so forth, and unfortunately because of COVID, we have fast tracked being one-to-one. So this is in our overall plan. It just is quicker than we had expected. Does that kind of answer your question?
I understand why we'll be needing them. My question was more just on the connectivity of the district and how many kids still need them that don't have them. But I totally understand the reasoning for the purchase. So
every student that is asked for a Chromebook has a Chromebook. So what I mean by that is we plan to give 9,800 Chromebooks. We did get some families that said, thank you very much. We have our own, and obviously we can, we're going to honor that. But every student at this time has a Chromebook, and we are, and we've handed out almost 400 hotspots. So that's about 900 families or so that have been, that have been able to connect because of that. And so, there are still families, we are still getting requests for hotspots, and in all transparency, Pat and I've kind of had some conversations about, this is an ongoing thing, and just because you have internet now doesn't mean something doesn't change. And so we'll continue to look for avenues. But as far as the Chromebooks, all students have a Chromebook.
So Stephanie, the changes to the touchscreen. Really, we have an opportunity to buy touchscreens for our K2, So that's really the switch. We're trying to get that technology into the hands, and then those Chromebooks that they already have, those families already have, those will come back into the fleet for the one-to-one.
Got it.
Can I bring a comment on that? Only because I spoke to a mother of a first grader who English is a second language, and they have their own devices. So they were keeping their own devices, but her youngest one is working, her teenager is helping them, but having problems. And so I explained to her if she got one of our Chromebooks, because there was one for every child, it might make it easier since she's not techie savvy, for that child as well. And so it might be something you want to bring up in the family meetings, that how those Chromebooks are set up special. So some of those families, not all of them have, like my granddaughter, my son's very techie, so he's able to download everything and make hers work. But not everybody does it, and they're struggling using their own devices. So it might be worth encouraging people who are struggling with their own devices to use one of the Chromebooks. Just an idea.
That's great, Frida. We will definitely do that.
I had a question, Derek.
Sure.
And I may not be remembering this correctly, but I thought in a previous meeting there was something said about that. Once we were moving to the one-to-one, that all of the high school students were going to get brand new Chromebooks, and then the older ones would be passed down to the lower grades. What happened with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we purchased 1,600 Chromebooks that would get the high school up to date, and the 2,300 were brand new that should be coming here by the end of October, will be for the middle school, and then the middle schools will flow down until to the 5th, 4th, and 3rd grade kiddos, but the high school kids have newer Chromebooks. So the 1,600 ones that we did a little over a year ago were to backfill the older ones, or the older Chromebooks that were at the high school, and now the middle schools will get all brand new ones.
So I misunderstood that it wasn't that they were getting new Chromebooks, like brand new Chromebooks. They're just newer than some of the others. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And this is something that Casey Rodriguez and I've talked about. It gets confusing when we've bought Chromebooks in the past. It's been, okay, we need to replace this model number. Well, it's sprinkled throughout the whole district, and it's confusing to cabinet. It's confusing to me. It's confusing to principals about, okay, so we bought 2,300 Chromebooks, let's say. Now, where did they go and which ones? So what we're trying to do in our replacement plan is replace by level. So, so we say to the board, we say to the community, we say to principals, to families, we just purchased 2,300 Chromebooks, and they will be replacing the middle school. And that's why with this, we were if you approve the purchase of the touchscreens, we're very specific about it being the lower grades at the elementary school. At the high school, some students did get new Chromebooks because we had about 1,600 that were ready to be end of life. And so that means that they're no longer supported by Google, that they no longer get updates. And basically Google says that you can use them until, basically they don't work anymore. But that really ties our hands. So the 1,600 really at the high school replace those. So some students at the high school did get brand new ones. Some of them, roughly half, not quite half, had Chromebooks that were, still very viable, and there was nothing wrong with them as far as what Google calls end of life. So that's kind of a very verbose way, long-winded way of me saying that some students did get them at the high school. But as we move forward, one of my goals with Superintendent Richardson is to be very clear with the board and and families in the community and so forth about what levels we're replacing. So as we're coming to you in the future, it will be like we're saying, we want X amount of Chromebooks for this group of students.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? This is an action item.
If not, I move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we will go ahead and take another roll call vote. Stevens moved, Larson seconded. Christopher?
Aye.
Zerama, I vote aye. Stevens?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Barber?
Aye.
Vero?
Aye.
And Mudanovic is absent. The approval or the purchase of technology devices is approved. The next item that we have is a resolution authorizing amendment number 1 to the 2020-2021 budget for school district number 40, Multnomah County, Oregon. Pat, go ahead again.
Okay, so in your packet, you should have a budget amendment, and what it's doing is moving appropriations from instruction and support to community service and to our transit area. And that's because, as you all know, we've had quite a shift and change in all the grant funding we've received or have not received from the time that we actually adopted the budget. And so we have had a lot more focus on community services, such as getting our families Chromebooks and or hotspots. And then also our early childhood program did receive all their Student Success Act fund as well as CARES funding. So they actually have to pass through some additional funding in the lieu of transits to Hood River and Columbia Gorge, which we subcontract with to provide services, early childhood services in those counties. Any questions?
Okay, there are no questions. We will go ahead and, well, we need someone to,
I move approval yet again.
Second.
thank you, Christine. All right, we will start. Oh, any discussion, further discussion? Seeing none. Christopher?
Aye.
I vote aye. Stevens?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Barber?
Aye.
Oh, Barber, you were on mute. Oh, sorry. I think I'm still here and not. Your little microphone thing is still on mute. Just want to make sure for the record. I think I saw you.
Aye.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. That resolution is approved. Okay. The next item that we have is the superintendent's report. Go ahead when you're ready, Ken.
Great, thank you very much. First and foremost, it's great to see all of you, and thank you for all your continued work. It is greatly appreciated. I also want to just start by publicly recognizing and thanking all of our staff. There is a lot on their shoulders. There's a lot going on this year, and I can tell you that I'm very proud of all they're doing to provide the best education they can. You know, we'll always share with the board that there's definitely bumps. There's things we're still learning. There's things we're working out, and there's things that we have to simply get better. But I am also hearing lots of feedback about how much better it is from last spring, and that our community does see a change and is grateful for that, and that it is going well. So there's always different messages and communications, and it's all truths from our families. But what I do know is our staff, every single one of them is a first-year teacher. Every single one of them is a first-year IA. No one's ever been through this. So it's all new, which just adds a certain level of stress, anxiety, and I truly believe our staff are taking it on with grace and dignity and working hard for our students. So I want to publicly recognize them and just give them a shout out for all they're doing. Every classified staff, licensed staff, administrator is trying to do all they can for our students. And I know for one, I appreciate it. So with that said, a couple just updates fairly quick, and then I want to spend some time in my superintendent's report to review goals. So a reminder, and I'll talk about the goals in a little bit, but before I do that, just a couple updates. The very first one is a reminder on enrollment. We have I sent you information around enrollment, but a reminder right now, or as of October 1, we are down about 385 students, which is about a 4% drop year over year. So from this time last year, Good news, bad news. Bad news is our enrollment is still trending down, unfortunately. Obviously, it's a little messier right now to try to calculate and try to understand, are there families that are still in our district and not just choosing not to be with us because of COVID? That could change. So how accurate is that? We're still trying to navigate, but the reality is we are down. The only piece of good news I can share around that, and it's not really good news, but the reality that we did prepare. So when we built the budget, the number and the enrollments, we did key it down. So really in the budget, as far as enrollment, I believe we're only down about 1%. So we did project a continuing declining enrollment. So, that softens the blow a little bit, but it's still, unfortunately, enrollment is trending down, which will have an impact as we continue through this year and building our budget. The next one real quick is just an update on COVID. I'm sure you all have been tracking as of September 27th, so they're behind a few weeks. A reminder, we go off of a 3-week window. Every 3 weeks before we can ever open, we have to meet certain metrics. And right now, those metrics say that we're at about 41 cases per 100,000. Reminder, to reopen, we have to be at 10 or less cases per 100,000. And we are also at a test positivity rate of 6.4%. Now that's in Multnomah County. I'm giving you the numbers and data for Multnomah County. A reminder that we have to be below 5% test positivity to actually be returning to school. Again, in our district, we have made the decision to be closed through early January. The board took that decision early. So this data isn't informing whether we open or not. We are closed through January. I'm just trying to share with you the information we have, and we're tracking to see how it plays out. Related to that, many of you might know or have listened to Governor Brown's press conference earlier this week. And in that press conference, she did talk about revisiting the metrics to reopen school, revisiting and looking at the metrics. And I believe softening in them is what she's thinking. Reading between the lines, I have no inside knowledge about what that looks like, other than they said they'd be doing it in the next few weeks. But I really think that focus and what she's talking to and referring about is kind of our outline counties. Some of the counties with less populations, some of the counties that already are trending a much different trend line than us when it comes to COVID. I think they may be looking at different metrics possibly. I could be way off there. That's an estimate, but that's kind of our understanding. The other thing, I'll be talking to board leadership, last thing around COVID here, board leadership, we did close through January 4th. I'll be talking with board leadership in our next agenda meeting. And just a heads up to everyone on this call with us board meeting, I'll be looking at and talking to the possibility of extending that closure to the end of January. We do not have to make that decision in the near future, but I want to start the conversation. And the reason for that is the end of January is when the actual end of the second quarter is. So it's just more of a natural break. So just thinking about that out loud. And when we start looking at this, that might be something that I make a request to the board to consider. Again, it might be too early, but that's something that I'm starting to look at a little bit. At one point, I think we were hoping that we would be back for sure January 5th, right? Or the day after January 4th. At this point, I think that's more and more of a long shot. I'm not a doctor by any means, but when I'm reading the trend lines and kind of what I'm being told, I just don't know if that's going to happen. So with that said, that's a conversation we'll have. We will continue to monitor it. We're still continuing to do all the safety protocols as required in phase 1, and not just required because of the right things to do. So those are employees that are reporting to work, and we are expecting masks, washing hands, taking breaks, 6-foot rule, all of those things. The district, we are making sure that that's happening or doing the best we can to make sure that's happening. And then 2 other things. This one is this week I had the opportunity and privilege to attend a meeting with the Center for Equity and Inclusion. And that they are currently involved in working with school boards across our region. Many of you may have sat on that team or went to the original meetings related to that. I know Donna has been attending those meetings at this point, and it was a great meeting in which we had the opportunity to talk about regional equity work. It was superintendents, and then a few board members joined us, and I think it was a real conversation. I think we talked a lot about change, what that would look like, and the urgency of it. And the one thing that I took away from, well, I took away many things, but the one thing that I committed to and I want to do is remind our board that there is a Multnomah County Regional School Board Equity Retreat. It is on Saturday, October 24th from 10 to 3 p.m. It is going to be a virtual meeting. You've received an email from Lori related to this, but I will ask Lori to reach out to you following this meeting with the invite. And I just wanted to flag it. I know everyone's schedule is different. Many of you might have other commitments, but if at all possible, if you're available, I think it's going to be a powerful meeting and well worth the time. So I just want to extend that invitation and make sure that it was flagged, that it will be in your inbox as we move forward. One more quick announcement, and then we'll move into goals. And that is, I just wanted to announce publicly for all that are listening, and a big thank you to our licensed bargaining team. We do have a tentative agreement around bargaining, a 1-year agreement. Yes, I'm very happy about that. And I want to thank the licensed bargaining team for their flexibility, for their creativity, for their patience, and just ultimately for their continued conversation as we move forward. So there's nothing tonight. It's going through the process. Both our board and then DDEA and ECBC have a process to ratify. The intent right now is we will be bringing that contract for a vote or consideration of our board in November. But right now we have a tentative agreement, which is following lots of hard work by many people. And I just want to thank all those people for all the work they did. All right, the last thing I'd like to do is I'd like to spend some time. I emailed all of you a first draft kind of my goals, superintendent goals, and reminder, we had a workshop, and thank you all for all you did and all your input. I tried to capture everything that I believe we talked about, but I want to make sure I did. And I want to open it up to a conversation. I did ask Derek if he could put up on screen. I know a couple board members said they don't typically print everything, which I absolutely understand. So if you have it in front of you, great. If not, Derek, can you pull it up on the screen right now? Thank you, Derek. You can scroll down. This is all the standard, what we've done, kind of how we do the evaluation, reminder board. There's nothing really that changed there. This is just kind of a cover page reminding about our guiding principles as we're going through COVID, and just an acknowledgement that we are doing 1-year goals. These are not 3-year goals, which we're typically doing. And that's because of COVID, because this is a different year. So really kind of talking about our organizational excellence, and then scrolling down, Derek, our principles centering on equity, ensuring safety and wellness, cultivating connection and relationships, and finally that innovation piece. So those are all things that we're trying to stay grounded on through COVID and through this year as we'll continue to navigate and move forward. And then finally, if we scroll to the next page, we have 4 different goals. So you can see goal area number 1, and it is advancing equity with a specific focus on racial equity. And I'm not going to read the goal statement yet. I'll come back to it. Derek, if you can go to our next goal area 2. By the way, thank you so much for driving, Derek. Goal number 2, we talked about culturally responsive instructional leadership and improvement. And then there's some areas there where we'll come back and review. Derek, if we go to number 3, please. Thank you. Goal area number 3, communications and community engagement. And then finally, if we go down to number 4, we added executive leadership. So I think that all should match what we discussed, but again, we'll be open to discussing all that. Let's go back up to area 1, Derek. And area 1, thank you. The intro there is kind of what the goal's about, I believe. I'm not going to read that out loud. I tried to capture everything and try to add, but I will the goal statement read out just in case there's anyone in the community that's listening and doesn't have a screen on. So the goal statement reads, advance racial equity by aligning all systems, structure, and culture to ensure an equitable school district that is always student-focused and responsive to student needs. The superintendent will create the conditions that support an inclusive culture that provides staff, students, and families the tools to collaborate and partner to ensure every student receives the equitable education they deserve. And then the following strategies will be developed. And Derek, if you scroll down, The strategies, unless the board would like, I'm not going to read them all, but what I tried to do again is capture what we discussed and then just add an action to them. So some of them we didn't have action statements, we just had a topic. So whether it's provide, progress, complete, develop, these are some of the strategies, and then ultimately what I'd be reporting on, how far we've gotten, where we're at mid-year, and then at the end of the year. So I think maybe we'll stop one at a time, or would you like me to read all four?
I think you can read them all.
Okay. Okay, so Derek, if you want to scroll down to goal area 2, again, reminder, that little intro that we just scrolled past, which is fine, Derek, but the goal statement itself reads, improve student achievement with an emphasis on growth, on the growth model in all areas measured by the Oregon State report card, with an intentional focus to close the opportunity and achievement gap. Intentional emphasis will be focused in representing children of color, poverty, and second language learners, and reducing any disproportionate achievement results. The following strategies will be used too. And again, I won't read each one of those strategies. We have 7 different strategies we're looking at. Same thing, I tried to take the topics that were discussed, add an action to them. And I should have said these are still draft format. I want to make sure everyone understands that, just in case I run into a typo here before I'm done, but they are drafts. So Derek, if you go to the goal number 3, please. And the goal statement reads, create venues and communication strategies for all stakeholders to become engaged and provide authentic, meaningful, and informed participation in the David Douglas education environment. The superintendent will strengthen communications and connections among family, staff, students, and community members to build universal support and achieve educational excellence. And then again, the following strategies. There's 7 of those. And then finally, Derek, we'll go to the last one and we'll open it up to some discussion. And the executive leadership goal is lead, manage, and evaluate all systems and infrastructure with the David Douglas School District to make positive changes, influencing learning, employee relationships, infrastructure, sustainability, and financial accountability. The following strategies will be used. And again, there's a list of strategies in which we tried to also, or I tried to add actions. So if we want to go through one at a time, really, I just want to make sure that you had an opportunity to read these, to give input if you have any input. It doesn't have to happen all tonight, but definitely we can open up to discussion, or however the board chair, Andrea, would like to address this. But however we can move forward with feedback would be great.
Yeah, I think if we can go through each one at a time, that might be helpful. So we can start with advancing equity. Can get that one on the page, and hopefully we can see both the statement and then the strategies and outcomes. I don't know if there's a way to, yeah, maybe fit it in a different format. And let's see, this is going to be a little bit more challenging because I can only see about 6 folks on the top of my screen, but if you raise your hand, I can catch it on the panelist side. So go ahead and unmute if you have any questions, thoughts, comments on this goal area 1, advancing equity.
I mean, I guess it's hard for me to understand how to measure progress, what progress would mean on those couple that start with that. And I mean, you can even like say progress on the elimination of racial, I'd like to say racial equities by, as evidenced by the development and implementation of, the equity plan. That would be evidence. I guess, we don't have, it's a met or not met criteria, right? But it would be nice to get a little more specificity on what we think progress means this year.
Any other thoughts or comments on this one? The only other slight comment that I have is on number 3 for the equity plan. It kind of, the way it reads to me, maybe others are reading it differently. It's like you're completing the contents of the plan and not necessarily the drafting of the plan. So I might just stick in the word complete or finalize and get a board approval on racial equity plan and begin it. Like just kind of rewording that. That's really the only thing that I had on that one. But I think, to Stephanie's comment as well, I think some of these are a little unclear about progress, right? And what it really looks like providing a welcoming and safe and equitable school community. It might be helpful just to get a little bit, like, for example, like put some examples. Yeah, but I think in general, these definitely encompass our last conversation, and I know a lot of my own priorities. So I'm comfortable with this. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on to the next page?
Yeah. I think just what is a little concerning to me is, or maybe I just have the question, is this left to the superintendent or the district to assess what all of these things are? So in other words, to limit the elimination of educational inequities. Who is determining what those inequities are? And so in order to say at the end, oh yeah, we eliminated, like where is that list coming from? Where's the assessment, the specifics, I guess, assessment of here are the known inequities in the David Douglas School District, and then the working to eliminate them. And I think so in that same vein, the same thing, providing a warm and welcoming, do we have a picture of what a warm and welcoming and safe, equitable community looks like through the lens of people of color? I think there was one, even like eliminating anti-Black racism and white supremacy. Again, has that been assessed to say, here are the places where these things are evident, so that you can systematically go down that list and eliminate it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It makes sense to me. So, for example, typically what we've done, Donna, or I've done, and again, I think that's what we're talking about. This is how we do better. But for example, progress on elimination of education inequities. What I would do at the end of the year, tell you or give you examples of what we've done. Kind of what have we done as a district, where and typically for something like that, we'd be looking at disproportionate data, right? Areas that we do have measurement and disproportionate data, sharing with the board based on number one in this goal. Here's the actions that the district took. Here's how data changed or didn't change, whatever it may be. But ultimately, that was kind of the conversation. What I'm hearing now is a little more, you guys want to do that up front, which is fine. I don't have any again, I've written it down. And then all the way through, same thing, where it says, this is what we're going to do. I would typically, at the end of a goal cycle, share, this is what we've been doing. This is what we've instituted. This is what we're measuring. This is our efforts, what we're trying. Here's some data that shows, and kind of we review that. The one about anti-racism and Black, that's taken directly out of the resolution that's given to me to do. And to be quite honest, the first step at this point that we've done with that is met with our equity committee, our racial equity committee, to discuss that and ask about, do we keep that within the racial equity committee, or do we develop a separate committee? And we're still kind of in that phase where how are we going to engage in this work?
Okay. Yeah,
that's why I was trying to say, like, what can we be specific around? Like 1 year, what can we get done in 1 year, right?
Yeah, and I'm just adding that this determining what those things are. It sounds like, and I could be hearing wrong, that that you would be assessing what those things are. And to me, like, I guess an example is like, if we were talking about a gender thing, that the men are going to get together and decide how to make things more equitable for the women, as opposed to asking the women, what are the things that they think need to be addressed by the men? You see what I'm saying? And so what I'm saying is that it would seem that from the communities of color, or at least that they're part of determining what are the things to be addressed. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and you are, other than the relationships, the conversations, there are areas that are flagged specifically because of relationships and conversations with our communities of color. But you're right in saying that typically it's kind of looking at our work and then through my lens. So again, what you're suggesting, recommending, I wholeheartedly support. But then I guess it would take some steps to get that done, to get that input, to kind of go through that process, which I'm more than willing to do. I just would need to do that. I need to sit down, kind of form, okay, hey, we're doing superintendent's goals related to this. Really would like to talk to you, our community of colors and our outside organizations and inside, what would be good measurement tools? And again, more than willing to do that, but it will take some time.
Couldn't the equity committee help with that versus trying to go doing focus groups or reaching out to all these people? Because that's why you have an equity committee to help on racial equity. Because it seemed like they're already in tune to some of these issues. So it would streamline it a little more. Just a thought that it might help streamline a little more.
Yeah, I think they would definitely be a key voice in that type of model. Frida, not a concern, a reality. A reality is our equity committee right now is mostly staff, which is okay, but they're mostly staff. There's not a lot of outside voices on that committee at this point. That's something actually the committee we're discussing and trying to determine our next phase of reestablishing that committee or re-recruiting. Some people have, left the committee over the years, and so that's. We also have our staff of color affinity group that I think would be a great voice in this process as well.
Absolutely.
Other questions or thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thought is just if there's already some groups you can work with and get that information quicker, it might streamline it for you and not take so long. So the work can begin.
I agree with that. I think then I would want, my desire would be to come back to the board with, here are the things that the equity committee, the staff of color recommended that, or these are the issues in each of these areas. And so these are the things we are going to tackle this year. So then there's a specific thing to assess against at the end of the year. Otherwise, it's just kind of this vague, general, we're going to do something, but there's no, like the reason, we assess students based on that early benchmarks to say, okay, this is where they started. Now we can chart our growth. If we don't have specific, and we have specific categories in every subject area that we get those beginning benchmark levels from. If we don't have any of that, then it's just a vague progress because we don't know what we were assessing, anything in particular, and we don't know where we started. I hope that makes sense. So if these groups say, you know what, these are the areas that where we see white supremacy and anti-Black racism in our district. These 5 areas, these things are that. Then those that are the specific things we're working on. And at the end, you can say, this is how we move the needle on those 5 things. Okay.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I was hoping would come from that policy, and in terms of really being clear about a committee or a body of David Douglas, students, staff, community members to be able to flesh that out of and by those most directly impacted. So that's great. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move us along to the second goal. This is culturally responsive instructional leadership and improvement. Any other? Oh, I'm just going to lift up a comment from Christina, who mentioned there's an equity team meeting next Tuesday, which has students from the student council at the high school, the BSU, the Black Student Union, and the LSU, the Latino Student Union, and students from Fur Ridge. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Christina. Okay, so for this goal, any other thoughts or comments on instruction? I guess for me, one of the things that would be helpful, again, is to have actual numbers in here. So the goal is improve student achievement, but again, there's no like numbers of by how much or in which specific categories do we want to see, or do we know we've seen specific growth in for BIPOC communities, let's say, that we want to focus in on. So for me, it would be helpful to have not only the goals be a little bit more measurable here, but also throughout the year, if there are ways when we can be kind of getting that information, whether it's in the January report back or in other places. I know it's probably a little unusual this year with the lack of assessments that happened this last year, but I think having a little bit more tangible numbers would be helpful. And I see that Stephanie mentioned she's struggling a little bit with the differences between district goals and the goals for the superintendent. Yeah.
I mean, ideally, we would have them happen together, right? What are our district goals and what's the leadership that we need to make them happen? But yeah, I think sometimes I'm like, okay, well, yeah, we want to do that as a district, but how would we evaluate our leader job performance? I don't know, in 1 year.
I thought you were going to use the strategic planning, and then from there we could come up with whether it be board or district goals, but make sure the strategic planning is done so at least everything aligns.
I think that was the idea, but my point is like some of this stuff crosses into that, I think. Anyway, I'm just struggling with it myself. I don't know.
I have the same concern that Stephanie has, because if we, I don't know, this can't be made up of a bunch of goals that are just not achievable in the next year or the next 2 years. I don't want it to be chock full of goals that just are, we have something we do at work called SMART goals. I'm trying to look up real quick what that stands for, but it's a way of making goals specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And that's what SMART stands for. So, it feels like, if not that we're going to apply that method to this, but we've talked a little bit about measurable, or what things we're going to measure. But they also need to be attainable, so that's just my concern, is that these are great. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in here, but if we're talking about something that we want to get accomplished in the next year, then I have some concerns.
Yeah, and Christine, we thank you for that. We use SMART goals, so absolutely that could be something. And that's, I guess that's, we talked about it a little bit during the workshop. I brought it up. Like, for example, Portland Public Superintendent, I think, has 4 goals that are measurable, right? 4 very specific. And then he's evaluated on the standards of leadership. And he gives examples, right? So the problem I have is when we went through this workshop, we listed all of this, which is good, but to do a SMART goal around every single one of these, I would have concerns as well, to be quite honest, is how do we even do that, right? So we're morphing 2 different things. One is kind of aspirational and what we're doing, true actions, but how we measure them versus, a SMART goal of this is what, when, how, where, why, kind of a thing. But when usually in that type of format, there's like I said, 4 specific measurable goals. And what we have here is, again, 6 to 7 on each of different things. So I tried to capture that from the workshop, but I agree that it gets messy. All of these things are important. All of these things we have to be working on. All of these things I think I should be reporting on. But if they're, how we do that, what format that's in, matters. And I'll be honest, I'm wrestling with it right now as well. I know when I emailed these to you, I shared the little bit of the concern of the focus of where we're at this year today, right? And we don't stop our work. We can't stop our work. But the reality is where we're at today and what we're focusing on, makes some of this more difficult than others. Had the opportunity to meet with Donna the other day, and we had a great conversation talking about innovation, right? And talking about, our vision for reopening schools. We didn't even talk about that in the workshop, but really I feel that needs a lot of time as well. We should not be thinking that we're reopening schools exactly the way they were, right? We should be talking about how we're going to open up better. What are we learning? What are our opportunities? So anyway, just sharing with you, Christine, I absolutely understand what you're saying. And again, this format and how we did this format, it's kind of messy, and I'm trying to navigate it as well.
Well,
I think sorry, go ahead.
Oh, my thought when I'm looking at these long lists, okay, and normally you have 3 years to complete them in, so it's fine to have a long list. Maybe it should be prioritizing 3 or 4 at the most that are really attainable in a year. I'm looking at this one. Well, you want to ensure CDL is successful. Developing structured opportunities for tutoring and volunteering because everything's so different. That might be something that can be that should be done this year so it can be utilized. Reviewing sex ed might be one of those ones that isn't the high priority for this year. But look at because we're talking 1 year. We know we want to do train, plan, and implement for trauma-informed practices, but is necessarily something that can be all done this year, kind of thing. And it shouldn't be the priority when our in curriculum and stuff, we have to be looking at CDL and how we're doing it and stuff. So that was just my thought, is maybe not having quite so many objectives and strategies and narrowing them down a little bit, or having them prioritized, because I look at these lists and I'm wondering how you're going to get it all done with CDL too. So in 1 year.
I think it's important that we are also keeping in mind that like in this example, that's not 7 different goals there. There's the one goal of improving student achievement and with an intentional emphasis, around kids of color, poverty. And then these are the strategies or outcomes that would be evidence of having achieved that goal. It's not like, oh, here's 7 goals for Ken. This is one goal, and these are outcomes. So we could you can shorten the list of outcomes or strategies without eliminating people.
Agreed, Donna.
No, I think we're saying the same thing. It's just that I think some of these strategies are going to take more than 1 year to complete. And so the focus is like you said, on improving student achievement, especially students of color. So which one of these strategies would be really helpful in getting to that and prioritize those as strategies? That's what I'm saying.
So I do want to be slightly mindful of time, but I do love this conversation. And I think, one of the things that we could also do, and appreciate Donna's comment, ultimately our goal is to focus on the goals here. And, I think Ken did a really good job of highlighting all of the conversation in the workshop that we provided in the strategies and outcomes as we kind of went through all of those rabbit holes. I think one easy way to potentially bridge some of these conversations together is the last sentence in the goal statement could read something like the following strategies may be used or the board encourages to be used, so that it's clear that while we fully acknowledge and would love to see all of these strategies and outcomes in the next year, that it's very likely that there's going to be additional changes and priorities that are going to necessitate the superintendent's time. And so that might just be a quick fix. Again, this is a 1 year evaluation that we are putting together just to try it out. I will say that for this specific goal, it was already included in the past evaluation that we used for the past 3 years. We just changed the name of it. So in terms of, really looking at measurable outcomes for student achievement and growth, this has always been something that we've really evaluated on and paid close attention to. But I do think we can, if you all are okay with it, I'm interested to hear your opinions for that last sentence change in the goal statement. And it doesn't have to be just for this one, but it can be for all of the goals for the evaluation, so that it's a little clearer that, this is certainly our expectation. This is what we would like to see. And, we're kind of rolling with the punches or rolling with the times right now. So what do folks think of that?
I totally agree with that. I think that's a good disclaimer almost that goes before the strategies and outcomes. I also think that, some of these things like reviewing sex ed curriculum, honestly, like this is not the year to be making a bunch of curriculum changes. To me, I'm more concerned about how curriculum is delivered at this moment. Like at least, like my kids are 5th, right? So it's very much on my mind how these discussions are and how the curriculum is actually taught this year, just because of COVID. So that would be my suggestion. But yes, the strategies may be used. The flexible nature of this year should be incorporated. I agree, Andrea.
I also saw Christine's thumbs up, so I appreciate that. I will just reiterate my strong desire to leave number 3 in the review of sex ed curriculum. For me, I think it was very clear of the concerns that students had around rape culture and the need to really address the multiple incidences of sexual harassment and issues that we were seeing in our district and in other districts. I do think that this is a very timely and urgent item, regardless of whether or not students are in the district. So I would like to see it here. And I do see your comment, Stephanie, that it's outlined in a different goal, but I do think in terms of kind of holistically looking at that issue, for me, that would be something I would like to keep.
Would it be helpful to, and only if it's helpful, I'm thinking of the way we did some of the other listening sessions, Ken, would it be helpful if the board members kind of each chose, our, not here in this meeting, but maybe right after, chose our top 3 things, the things that we think are out of this each list, we think these are things that are really high priority, and then taking that feedback and, selecting the ones that are most repeated. I don't know, would that be helpful? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, no, Donna, I think it would be helpful. Again, all these came from our board workshop. So, we tried to capture what we heard with Andrea's help as well. She did great taking notes. She sent that to Lori. I tried to make those with my notes. I just tried to put some actions with them. Like, for example, the sex ed curriculum, that's what it said, sex ed curriculum, right? So then I tried to think, okay, what were we getting at there? What are we looking for there? So, but I'm going to key in on something. One, that'd be very helpful, Donna. But two is I'm hearing, or I thought I heard, which helps as well, because when we list all these in the workshop, and I might have misunderstood, I apologize, that these were kind of goals, and this is what we want you to do this year, and this was the list that was given me, if you will, right? So I tried to capture that and try to put it in play a little bit. But what I just heard Andrea said, which I think makes some sense and works and makes it more manageable in my mind, and I could have heard this wrong, but like, for example, each one of these goal statements, focus on the goal statement. In the goal statement, add some data, specific data that we'll be measuring in the goal. So now I have 4 goals that were measured by, right? I'm not going to be able to get all 7 of those. I'm going to basically try to capture, some data out of there. And then if we say maybe use 2, below are just some of the strategies, right? These are the strategies we're using. Again, I can report back on those strategies. How much progress did we make? Did we not make? Where we at? But as far as the goal, here's what we targeted to actual measure. That, again, I understand that concept. Like I said, when we did the workshop, these came as cross as all in my mind as, hey, these are goals. These are things we want to get done. So that's why they're framed this way. But if the board's interested in, or what I think, or I'm interpreting what Andrea just said correctly, that makes a lot of sense to me. Each one of these goals, there's 4. I will add data within those to make them SMART type goals. So you can say, okay, this is what we're measuring on. And then on top of measuring those with the data, you can also look at the strategies and objectives and examples, and we can report on those. Yes, we did that. No, we didn't. How we did it, why we did it, right? Part of it might even be, Donna, before we get to that, is gathering input, right? Part of it will be maybe for our next 3-year cycle, like you said, engaging communities to hear what their solutions and strategies and best practices would be. So it's not me, if you will, making, choosing those, but we're hearing from our community. So anyway, again, if I'm hearing that right, I can definitely take a stab at that. I'll also recognize, and this is might not be, I'm just going to say it. We do have another workshop in October scheduled, and I don't know, exactly what we're doing, but we might be able to carve some time for the board to really talk about what do they want to see and how, if the board's interested in that. But either way, that's kind of what I'm hearing right now, if that's resonating and making sense to our board.
Yeah, I like that. I also see that Stephanie put in the chat that she also has a thumbs up on that. I think that would be helpful, at least for me. Okay, I also see Donna had a thumbs up there. Okay. All right.
I'll take a stab at those 4 goals and tweak them a bit, the intent's there, but really add in measurements.
Great. So then just to sum up, it looks like we'll have a few more slight edits to further provide guidance on measuring each of these 4 goals from Ken. And we'll also see a slight change in that last sentence around the strategies as kind of just being our priorities, or encouraging the superintendent to use those based on additional conversations potentially, or communication around which of these are our priorities, or our top priorities, or kind of where we want to go. Just to briefly for communication, the other 2 goals that we have are communications and community engagement. That's the 3rd one. And then executive leadership as the 4th goal. So if we can scroll down, I'll just take maybe 30 more seconds to go through. So the goal statement, again, will be the area where Superintendent Richardson will come back and further flesh out. Here are some of the additional strategies and outcomes that we talked about for this one. And then for the last goal, if you can scroll down, executive leadership. Again, this is more focused on the internal structures, executive management, et cetera, for the district. Any other final, you can go ahead and close out. Thank you very much. Any other final thoughts, comments, questions? We don't yet have a final topic for our October workshop. So I appreciate the comment, Ken. If folks are interested, we can certainly have another discussion there. I'm comfortable not having, I think, well, yeah, we'll just play it by ear. I'm comfortable kind of with this conversation and potentially having other email or other type of communication, but definitely want to.
I just had one quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there going to be an Oregon State student report card this year with everything that's going on? Would that be a valid measure to use in the second goal area?
Oh, Ken, I think you're on mute.
Yep, I'm sorry. Yes, Aaron, the intent is there will be a state report card. In fact, we just got communication. Well, yes, remember, it's always a year behind. We got information about the embargo data. This year kind of depends. Will we actually do state assessments or not? The state's still targeting and saying yes. You know, there's lots of questions around that, Aaron, but yes, using that report card. We also have our own key performance indicators that we look at from grades K through 12, everything from 3rd grade reading, 8th grade on track, 11th grade on track, 9th grade on. So we have a lot of our own key performance indicators that I would include in there as well, Aaron.
All right, thanks, Ken.
Okay, all right. Well, if there's nothing else on that one, we will go ahead and move on. Or was that the last item that you had, Ken? Did you have anything else?
No, sorry. Yeah, that was it. The goals was the last thing on the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Great. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, cool.
Can I just get one little tiny comment in? I don't know if everybody saw back to the very beginning of Ken's report about possibly extending our comprehensive distance learning through the end of the month of January. Portland Public did make an announcement yesterday. They are planning on having comprehensive distance learning through, I believe, January 28th. And then the 29th is a teacher workday. So they're looking at the earliest start date for possible hybrid, I'm assuming, is February 1-ish. So I don't think it's too soon to discuss it if we want to talk about like next month. I don't know. Just wanted to get that in there.
Perfect, Christine. They did the same thing. They did it to the end of their second quarter, which that would be my suggestion. And I will definitely bring it to Andrea and Sahar in our board agenda planning and determine if that comes in November or how we take our next steps.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Okay, so moving on, the next item that we have is our financial report, and this is from Pat.
Good evening. In your packet, there's a financial update and investment report. This month, I have a little information from the state forecast, which was held the end of September. Caught a little bit off guard, I would say, for all business managers. As you all recall, back in June, the forecast was doom and gloom, and the state was projecting a significant negative balance. And in looking at their measurements and what they use in their projections, their collections, the unemployment, etc., at this point in time, they have reeled those numbers back significantly. So at this point in time, we don't project any further reductions from the state. If we can go back about 10 years ago, there were reductions during the fiscal year. So that was part of the concern as we started to see those economic forecasts go in a negative direction. So again, if we experience another COVID closure, anything could happen. We could see things turn the opposite direction fairly quickly. I do want to point out that the state forecast still does project reductions in revenues in future biennia, which is concerning for us because that will mean that we will be fighting for resources with everybody else at the state level. So our 2019-20 fiscal year is closed out. The auditors are finishing up. The CAFR is actually in their hands. They were delayed a little bit with the fires and everything else that's going on. So at this point in time, we have confirmed with them that they are on track. So we are hoping to get that to you in the December meeting, and we don't expect any changes at this point in time. For our current fiscal year, the general fund, right now, I'm anticipating a ending fund balance of about 16.5 million. I do anticipate that going up. As we all know, everything's in flux and spending patterns are probably not going to be anywhere near what they were last year and in prior years. And we'll probably have a few more surprises as we go along. Again, as Ken and Christine just talked about, whether we do or don't reopen school is a big factor, and whether we have a lot more PPE purchases that we're going to need to do if we have students in session, or if we do even a small hybrid model with maybe K-3 back. So there's savings, as Ken mentioned earlier, in substitutes. We're not seeing as much gas in buses. As we all know, we've done some furloughing for not having enough work. So there's various areas of anticipated savings, and then obviously unknown expenses as we continue through CDL. I do want to mention that we did do one budget amendment tonight for the grants fund, and I plan on bringing you a second. I put that off for next month since we are anticipating that tentative agreement. And so I want to make sure we get that incorporated in and I don't have to bring it to you 2 or 3 times. Let's see here. As we've talked in the past, in order to balance, we'll be looking at those, reducing those sub budgets, possibly reducing contingency, probably not funding community sports or community recreation, just because we don't think with social distancing those will happen this year. Possibly looking at some vacant position elimination, not purchasing our social studies adoption, reducing the summer school budget for high school. If there's anything else, we'll bring all that and summarize it for you next month. Nutrition services is probably the other area of concern right now. That is projected at about a $622,000 deficit by year end. So that's a little higher than what we had at the end of last year. As a reminder, we do need to come up with a plan and get that rectified by the end of this year. I still have not heard of any solutions from the state. We are serving around 4,000 to 5,000 meals. That's including breakfast. We do anticipate starting beginning in November, providing dinner with the breakfast and lunch. And we are looking at our staffing there, and we anticipate that if we're not seeing meals go up and costs decline, then we'll probably be making some additional adjustments in staffing in our nutrition services. Let's see here. Those are probably the highlights for tonight. One other area, if you recall, a while ago, we did the high school DDC project, and we got about $194,000 from Energy Trust for that project. Since completing that project, the rules for Senate Bill 1149 funds have been relaxed. They notified us that we could actually reimburse ourselves $350,000 out of that particular fund. So we will be looking at using that for additional facilities projects. Are there any questions?
Pat, originally, when we put this, we called it the placeholder budget in June. We discussed if there was going to have to be any major changes, we'd bring back the budget committee to help discuss it. It doesn't sound like we're going to, other than your little pieces that you have to make corrections to as things change, it doesn't look like we're doing any major reductions or anything that would cause us to need to do that. Is there?
I don't think so, but if you would like to bring them back, we could do that.
Oh, it was more,
Changes.
we discussed more of it being if there was going to be major reductions. I know we could as a board make the decision, but we were thinking if there was major reductions, it might be good to get some other community input that way. But if we're not, then there's no need.
Any other questions or comments for Pat?
Can I ask, this would go to Ken, it was early in his meeting when he was talking about enrollment and then we got on goals, so I forgot to ask it. I was hearing on the news regarding there was a 3% drop statewide in enrollment. And a large portion came from kindergarten enrollments, people who chose not to enroll their kids after all because they don't have to. Were we seeing a big difference in our kindergarten enrollment?
Yes, the answer is yes. So, and you're right, kinder and the lower grades. For us, example, I believe it's, I don't have it in front of me right now, I apologize, but I believe it's 355 at the elementary level in total, where our middle was flat and our high school was up about 20. So it's really all at the elementary and definitely at the kinder level as well. We also have a document that Pat received through OASBO that I can tee up and send as an email just for information that shows all of our neighboring districts, including districts in Washington County, where all of their enrollments down as well. So yes, trending across the state, our understanding is 3+% down across the state, which is it has an interesting impact because if the number of students goes down, but the funding stays the same, then the amount per state student goes up. So it's kind of interesting how it works. But anyway, our kinder numbers are down as well. We've been working diligently. Many of you might know we've absorbed classes. We've eliminated kinder classes. We've been doing some things to bus students to balance, and it's not bust right now, obviously, but we're going through a process where students might be in the Gilbert Park catchment area, but going to school with Menlo Park students right now, just as we're balancing class lists, et cetera, because of the sizes.
It's interesting because there you don't have to worry about busing them. It's just they go into a different classroom.
That's correct.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. All right. Thank you, Pat. One second. Okay, so moving along, the next item that we have is our Division 22 standards. This is an action item, and we have Brooke for our presenter. Go ahead, Brooke.
Everyone, and Derek, can you tee up the PowerPoint? Thank you. Okay, here we go. So it is Division 22 time. Again, you'll notice it is a lot earlier this year. Typically, we come to you at our January board meeting and present. And I'm going to talk to you about a shift in the timeline in a little bit here. But one thing that's just a reminder is that we are reporting to you on last year. So we're always reporting to you on standards from the year prior, which is one of the reasons they shifted the timeline. So it makes perfect sense. So Derek, if you could advance the slide. Okay, so what is Division 22? They are Oregon administrative rules that from the Department of Ed, the whole goal is to provide high quality experiences and equitable opportunities for students across the state. So regardless of what school, what district student goes to, that we all have similar standards of practice that we adhere to. It's really important to know that these administrative rules are the floor. They're the minimums. They're definitely not the ceiling. We could always do more, but they are the floor of the expectations that every district in the state is required to meet. And again, it's an opportunity. While they are deemed compliance, it is an opportunity for districts to reflect on our practices and how close or how far we are to meeting a goal. And if we need to take corrective action, we always have an opportunity to do that and get corrective feedback and actionable feedback from the Department of Education as well. So changes for this year, because it is a little bit different. So back in April of last year, the State Board of Education adopted a new administrative just for the Division 22 standards for the 2019-20 school year. So basically it was in response to COVID, it was in response to distance learning and providing districts more flexibility with the standards we were required to report on and the standards we were required to meet. So here are the standards that we are looking at this year. So every year when we present on our Division 22 standards, it's typically, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, 54. So you could see these standards, there's 17 of them, were chosen for each district to report on this year. And so I'm not going to go through all of those, but you can see from diploma requirements to our talented and gifted services to, assessment and complaint procedures. So Division 22 covers a wide range of standards for school operations. So the timeline that you can see, obviously, we are required to present to you and our community by November now. And this timeline will be the same timeline moving forward. So it's not just for this year, it is a permanent change. So by November 1st, we are required to report to our local school board our compliance with the standards that have been chosen for this year. We also need to post the report, which you have in your board packet, and this presentation, which we'll include as well on our website. And then there is a report that I will fill out and submit to the Department of Education as part of this process. And we have till November 15th to do that work. So just so you can see side by side and the changes of what happens. So when we reported to you on the 18-19 standards, we reported on 54 standards. This year we're reporting on 17. The 18-19 standards were really designed for a fully intact school year with uninterrupted instruction. Whereas this year, we're really looking at the flexibility of the standards and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and interrupted instruction that happened in the spring particularly. They've moved the February 15th deadline, as I've mentioned, to a November 15th deadline, which really makes sense because we're reflecting on the year prior. It did seem odd that we were doing this in the middle of the year, the next year. So it allows us to, if we need to make changes, we can do them as quickly as possible. So this was in your board packet. And so you can see this is a document from the Department of Education that they gave us to fill out to share with you that we will post on our website. So just so you know, the process that we go through as a cabinet team with each of these standards is it is a great opportunity for us to go through, and we look at what the standard is, and as cabinet leads, they are assigned out to each of us. So we each have a different standard that we're responsible for. We go through and we read the administrative rule. We assess our practices. We look at what we're doing. We come back as a cabinet and we go through them together to discuss compliance or if we're not in compliance. So this year we went through each of these 17 standards and we did deem that we were in compliance with all 17. Which was good to know. But again, they're the floors. So we're always looking at, just because we're in compliance, as Ken says, we could always get better. So we're always still working on how, again, how we can do more. So there are action items tonight, as mentioned. The first one is the school board, acknowledging receipt of the Division 22 report. And then I will work with Dan to get that posted on our district website. And then I will also complete the submission to the Department of Ed. And as part of that, I need to complete the report that shows our compliance level. We'll work with Lori because we need to include our board meeting minutes to show that we had this conversation. And we also need to include the link to the website where the Department of Ed can find these reports. So Derek, the last one is just if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. So I don't see any questions. A reminder that this is an action item. So if we can get a motion to approve and a second, I will go ahead. Oh, Stephanie, she did it.
No, go ahead.
No, you did it.
Christine was right. I move approval. Yes.
You approve. Seconded, Larson. Awesome. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll call the roll. It looks like I'm first. Andrea, I vote aye. Barber.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Christopher.
Aye.
You, Stevens.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
And Barrow.
Aye.
Okay, and Winovich is absent. Okay, so the Division 22 standards are approved. Thank you, Brooke. So this next item, appointment of budget committee positions 4, 5, and 7. I feel like this is also an action item. So I did check in with, well, let me take a step back. So each of our board seats are tied to a budget committee seat, which also rotate on term limits. We have 3 that are up for renewal, or I guess up for new appointments, which are positions 4, 5, and 7, who correspond with board members Muranovich, Barrow, and Christopher. I did check in with Sahar just recently, and she did share that she is comfortable with us going ahead and moving forward with her appointment, or the person who she had recommended and would have liked to see in the seat. That's Katrina Whittle. And then we also have Mitzi Stone for position 5. That's for Aaron Barrow's seat. And then position 7, Carrie Fry for Frida Christopher. So let's see, how do we do this? So let's see. So for position 4, I guess if folks are comfortable, she went through pretty significant process. I'm sure Aaron and or Frida can talk through perhaps some of the things that you all did for your positions, but I do think she's really excited about this candidate. And again, given I think the family emergency, just wasn't able to be here to share all the accolades that I know she was planning on sharing. Erin or Frida, do you have any, can you share a little bit about your recommendations for these positions?
Well, I don't mind starting. I think you should know we had quite a list. We had 14 people apply and had to pick 3. We probably had, from the time that I've been doing it, the most diverse group ever. And it's kind of hard. You're weighing diversity and how you think they could help serve on it as a budget committee member. I know I recommended to Ken, because we could only pick 3 people, is he may want to tap into some of those diverse individuals. I know one was actually a graduate of David Douglas High School a couple years ago. I believe he was African American, if I remember right. But it just seems like we have a couple of strategic planning going. I know I pushed this when I narrowed it down to 2 and then talked to them and then made my selection. Unfortunately, one of my 2 was not a registered voter or a citizen, and that appears to be a requirement for the budget committee. So, so I couldn't even consider him once he mentioned he wasn't a citizen, but I just made a comment that our no future posting that needs to be more evident what is needed. There's the minimum requirements for it. But as to my choice, I chose Carrie Fry because she has a lot of background in finance and budgeting. And since Tom left our budget committee, who was a controller, we haven't had anyone with a real in-depth knowledge of budgeting and finance. And I thought it would be a good addition to have on there sometimes someone who really looks at the nuts and bolts real hard. So that's why I ended up with Carrie Fry as my selection. But I think with all those that did apply, it's such an opportunity to tap into, because they're showing an interest in doing something in the district, and to pull them into the equity committee or the strategic planning committee, you know, or anything else the superintendent might have going, it gives them some starting names. So that's where I'm at. I'll leave it to Erin.
Thanks, Frida. Yeah, I picked Mitzi Stone for a couple of reasons. She's an accountant, which is fantastic. Knows way more about money than I ever have, or probably will. She has 2 kids in the district, so she has a solid investment in seeing the David Douglas district do really well. And I was excited about that. And she immigrated to the United States, so she brings an immigrant's perspective to the district too. And I think that's really important to help represent our immigrant student population. So I think she ticks a lot of boxes for me. And she's just a really fantastic, fun person, great personality. And I think she's going to be a wonderful addition to the budgeting committee.
I should mention that even though mine did have children at Gilbert Park, but some of these are community members who don't even have any children in our district yet. And I found it interesting. We're starting to get people thinking about doing things before they even have children in our district. And I think that's a very positive note for our district, to have some of these people who really have to look to the future instead of, I have to say, in the past, it was always older people who were doing these things whose children were almost either they were in school or heading toward high school or out of school. So it's kind of nice to see some of these younger people wanting to be involved.
Okay, any other discussion or questions about these candidates? So I actually am not seeing, sorry, 1 minute. I'm not seeing that this is an action item. Can Ken, can you clarify a little bit about kind of next steps here?
Yeah, so I don't believe it has to be an action item, and that's why Lori put it that way. She just followed what we've done in the past, really, because these are appointees. The board gets to appoint, that's one of their privileges as a position. So they're appointing. I think they're just communicating with the board. Now, obviously, if the board would rather take action on them or to confirm these appointments or go through that process, we can do it that way, but I don't think it's required. And I know we haven't always done that in the past. So at this point, my understanding is these appointees are being appointed, and it's more of a communication to the other board and kind of a public process that this is who's being appointed to this to our budget committees.
Okay, well, I have no objections. I definitely appreciate your work, Erin, Frida, and Sahar, and looking through all of the potential applicants. I also just want to acknowledge and lift up all of the great candidates and encourage folks, if you were not selected this round, to please continue to be engaged. There's lots of opportunities this year, with our strategic plan, with equity work, and these seats are always up. Like I said, they rotate in terms, and so there's always another opportunity there. So, okay, well, if there is not, yep.
I'd like to add something because of the issue with the citizenship this time, is that it's a posting and they can either send in a resume or a letter or whatever. But I found going through these, it actually, some people I didn't look at as well because there wasn't enough information to say, okay, that person checks a couple of boxes, as Erin says. So it might be in the future, we have some really brief application that gives us some basic information. So, and then if they want to add a resume to it or whatever, it would be helpful, because I had a couple that it was very sparse on what they provided and stuff. So, and of course, you gravitate to the ones who give you more information. So it might be helpful if we kind of change I still like the idea of posting, getting people involved and wanting to do it, but just so it would be, I think, fairer for all of them. Because a person who is more savvy on resumes and stuff is going to look better than someone who isn't, just by this process. Just some suggestions.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on, we have our second reading of our board policy. I will turn it over to Policy Committee, Frida, Stephanie, and Donna as an alternate.
Well, this is a second reading. I wasn't making any additional changes other than what I did before the first reading. So unless Donna or Stephanie had any, or anyone else wanted any changes, we're just on to the second reading.
Okay.
Donna's on mute. Did you?
Oh, thank you. I didn't see.
I had a question just about one of the policies regarding expulsion. And I just wondered, I know that there's been references to us looking at moving towards more restorative justice policies, but I don't necessarily see that reflected here. And I'm wondering, is that if we, accept this right now, where does that put us in terms of that work? Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so Donna, I was just looking through the policy list here real quick. I'm sorry, it took me a minute there. So where it doesn't change the direction of the work, what this does is basically authorize that we do have an expulsion process. That does not mean that we do not look for restorative practices or implement more restorative practices. What it does mean is if we do have a situation, we still have statutes that require expulsion for certain activities, certain things that may occur. So this is the process if we ever do, or we need to go through that expulsion process. This is the policy. But as a district, we're still going down the road of actively looking at a more restorative practices and ensuring that we're not using expulsion just as on a whim, for lack of a better term.
Okay. So if we wanted to put in place a full restorative justice policy at some point, that would be in addition to this or replace this?
So my understanding, it would be in addition to it, because there are, again, certain statutes that require expulsion. If those get changed along with the same time, then it possibly could be a full replacement. But the way I understand it right now, and I'd have to do a little research, Don, I apologize, but I could look, that it would be both. That if there's certain things that happened, that this would be expulsion, but the restorative practice policy could take, this is a priority. You exhaust this before you ever get to that. I mean, we could establish a policy like that, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only concern, I think. Yeah.
Any other questions on these before we move to vote? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the board policies. Do I need to name all of them?
No.
Each individually? Okay, the board policies that we were sent, that we have just reviewed for the second time.
I'll second.
I love it. Discussion. Seeing none. On first, Valderrama, I vote aye. Barber.
Aye.
Christopher.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
And Barrow.
Aye.
Okay. The policies are approved. And that is the end of our agenda. I have exactly 9 o'clock on my clock, and I will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you. Oh, hang on. I see.
I'm sorry. I just got to say it. Christina, you are a trooper. Every board member she's been from beginning to end. I want to thank you, Christina, and your input and chat and everything else. It's been great. And I didn't say it during your report, but the virtual assembly was really fun. And yeah, so you guys are doing a great job. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina.
Thanks, Christina.
Could you send us the link on that virtual assembly? I'm not an Instagram person.
I will. I'll send it to you. You actually received it. You received it from Stephanie Matthews. She sent the announcements or the, gosh, someone help me with it called. But anyway, it's linked in there, but I'll send the separate link to Frida.
Is that the one that came out this week? Because I was down vacation and I was only reading what I had to read.
Yeah, no problem. Either way, I'll send it to you just so you know it was in the email that came from the high school that gave kind of the updates on a number of things. It's in there, but I'll send it to the whole board. I'll send the link to the whole board.
Okay. All right. 9:01. I'll adjourn. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good rest.